So, so one thing that we mentioned, I want to talk a little bit more about. We mentioned last time about the case where the woman she did a tax shelter, lahavdil. She didn't want her husband to get the field in case they'd get in case she would die first. So she sold it she gave it to her daughter, but the only reason was to avoid her husband getting it. So we spoke about Rashi's opinion. Rashi's opinion was that how do we know that the whole thing was an evasion? Because she told the witnesses that the whole thing was a scam. So the Rush doesn't like that because Rashi's opinion, because the Rush says we have a principle that and we learned this in the second parak, that if witnesses sign on a star and they are known to us, if the star is a good star. So it doesn't matter if they orally tell us later that it was a scam. The fact that they signed on the star, it's a good star. So the Rush doesn't like what Rashi says. So then he mentioned basically similar to what I said. It's an umdana demuchach. Everyone knows that she's doing it. It's common knowledge. Everyone realizes that she wants to avoid the husband getting it. Oh, I'm on the wrong page here. Whatever. So he has a whole bunch of questions on Rashi. So therefore, he says, and similar to the Gemara he quotes the same Gemara I mentioned, that a person sold all of his possessions because he wanted to move to Eretz Yisrael, and then things fell through and he couldn't go. So everyone will give him back his stuff and he'll pay the money back. So so the Rush says that the whole reason she's doing it is because she doesn't want the husband to benefit from it. So if she would own these fields, the husband would be able to benefit from the fruit that the field would last. So therefore, the person who received the gift, it's theirs, and any fruit that the field produces, that person gets to use. And if the lady dies, the field would then go to her inheritor as long as it's not the husband. Because if her closest heir is the husband, then her whole thing that she wanted isn't going to happen. Then he has, where can I? Rabbeinu Shimshon quoted that, so this wasn't just done for Ksuva. Sometimes someone had a debt, and what happens? Your stuff gets mortgaged to the debt, right? So in order for it not in case of a mortgage, but what if a guy if he has debts and he doesn't have anything mortgaged to it, but he wants to get away he wants to move all of his assets out of his name, so that in case he doesn't pay off the debts, they're not going to be able to be paid off. So it's a similar thing. It's not the case of Ksuva, but it's a place of trying to avoid your property going. So you made a sham gift that you gave your stuff to someone. But Rabbeinu Tam also the case where a man gave away his assets so that if he died first, his wife wouldn't get it. There wouldn't be anything left for the ksuva. So Rabbeinu Tam says that the gift that the person is a good gift. So our Gemara says here that when you make a star to avoid paying to someone who has to pay, it doesn't work. And Shmuel ripped up the star. That's because her kavana is that she doesn't want her husband to get it, and in this case, the husband's not going to get it because the Gemara says that in this case, it's made like property that the husband doesn't know about, that it doesn't go to him. So therefore, the Rabbeinu Tam says it's not exactly a limbo situation, but the person who receives the gift doesn't really get it either. So what happens? The she'ena miskavenas haknos of ekrim, so you can have hacho de lo kanabal. So the person who received it doesn't really acquire it either. So it's not considered a shtar mavriach. So he says the shtar mavriach is only when you're trying to avoid. But if it's not really going to avoid it completely, so then it's not doesn't fall under the category of what our Gemara is talking about. So that's where Rabbeinu Tam deals with the situation. And the Rosh himself says that according to that, then Rabbeinu Tam kind of distorts the whole Gemara. Because the whole Gemara is talking about a star that's going, you're trying to avoid things. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, you are trying to avoid it, but it's not the exact thing that the Gemara is talking about. So the Rosh doesn't like what Rabbeinu Tam said, because then the Gemara doesn't look like what the Gemara is actually trying to say. He's getting away the whole spirit of the Gemara, and he's saying that according to the letter of the law, this isn't a shtar mavriach because you're not running away, because the recipient doesn't really receive it. So what's going on? Because the point is that because she doesn't really want she doesn't want the husband to receive it, so the husband isn't going to receive it, and she doesn't want the other person to receive it, so they don't really receive it either. So how does it work? So Rabbeinu Tam says it works. So the Rosh himself says. So it's a big discussion in the Gemara, and it's interesting. Okay, so I think we're at the Mishnah 79b3, the middle of Ayin Tes Amud Beis. Naflu lavadim ushvachos. So the Gemara our parak started talking about if she inherited or acquired fields, real estate. What happens if she received other types of inheritances? What if she got male slaves or female slaves? So zakenim yamachru v'lakach mehem karka. If they're elderly, they should sell them and buy land with them. V'hu ochel peiros. And the husband gets to eat the fruit that the fields develop. Because why is this halacha this way? Because if slaves don't live forever, and so because they're old, they're not going to last so long. And in order to make it that the value of the slaves are in the marriage, so you sell them and have karka, and the land will be owned by her in case they get divorced or he dies first. But he gets to use any fruits that grow from the field. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Amar Lo Simkor Mipnei Shehin Shevach Beisavia. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says we don't sell slaves because when you have more slaves, it's more honor to her house. So if she would be selling slaves that are from her father's house, it's going to diminish the respectability of her father's house. So we don't sell the slaves. Naflu Lazeis Mugfanim. What if she got olive trees or grapevines? So this is a case where somehow, let's say her father didn't own the field, but someone gave him or sold him the grapevines or the olive trees themselves, but without any land. So the field is owned by Shmuel, and the trees itself are owned by Yisachar. And Yisachar died without sons, so it goes to his daughter. So this isn't real estate. This is something that has no principle. Because I mean, the idea of real estate is principle, and stuff that grows on it is considered like interest that you gain on it, so the husband gets to use the interest. We call it fruit, the Gemara calls it peiros. So, zakenim yimachru, if they're elderly trees, you should sell the trees karka peiros and buy a property, fields with it, and the husband gets to use whatever the property, whatever the fields develop. Rabbi Huda Mer Lotim Kormi Pnei Shein Shevach Beisavia. But Rabbi Huda says you can't sell these trees because it's also part of the glory of her father's household. The fact that he owns trees, even if it's not a field. So Rashi says it doesn't mean that you can't sell them, but it's if the wife doesn't want them to be sold, the husband doesn't have a right to sell them. But if she agrees to sell the slaves or to sell the old trees, we're allowed to. So Gemara, Amarav Kahana Marav, Machlokas Shenaflu Besada Shalah. The whole machlokas about the trees is if they fell in her field and she owns the field. But if it's in a field that doesn't belong to her. So let's say somehow she only inherited the trees, but not the land. Everyone agrees that you should sell. All the Tanaim agree that you sell the trees because there is no principal, or the trees will eventually stop developing, so there is no principal left. So this is something that's going to depreciate until zero. We don't want it to depreciate until zero, so we sell the trees and we buy a field with that. Maskell for Rav Yosef asks against it. But the first case of the Mishnah was if she inherited male slaves or female slaves. That's considered. So that's considered. It's similar to a case of trees because there is no real estate that they're connected to. So having slaves is only like, according to Rav Yosef's question, it's only like having trees without any fields around it. Yet the first case of the Mishnah was machlokas between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and the Tanakama, if you're allowed to sell the slaves or not. So in the second case of the Mishnah, when you have trees without a field, it shouldn't be any different. So Alaid Marhach Yidmer. So the Gemara says, so if Rav Kahana's answer must have been said, it must have been said in the following way. Amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav Machlokas B'Soda She'eno Shalah. The Machlokas, whether if she doesn't want the trees to be sold, you can't sell it, or we sell it anyway. That Machlokas is if the trees are in a field that's not hers. But if the trees are in her fields, everyone agrees that you do not sell it because the fact that this was her father's field and it has these trees in it, it's better to keep it. So lahavdil, just a little bit, when Naomi and Rus came back in Megillus Rus, they still talk about redeeming Avimelech's fields. So even though her father died and now it's hers, but still, it's the lahavdil, the Applebaum family orchard, because Applebaum means apple orchard, right? Baum. So it's so even though her father or grandfather or great grandfather, whoever the name originally was, it's still known as that family's property. So it keeps more family respectability to keep it. Next Mishnah. Hamotzi hotos anichse ishto. Okay, so what if the husband had to spend money to upkeep the land? This land is not his. He doesn't get any benefit. He doesn't own any of the principal. But what happens if he spent money for the principal of the field? If he spent a lot of money and only ate a little bit from it, kimav achal harbe, or he spent a little bit to improve it, but he ate a lot more than what he spent. Masha hotzi umasha achal achal. Whatever he spent, and whatever he benefited from it, he benefited from it. Meaning, it doesn't matter if even though he spent money, even if he spent money, but because he did benefit from the field, so we consider it even. Even if he spent $100,000 on the field and he only ate $10,000 worth of produce, he had the benefit for that $10,000. So he got the benefit that he was due. So it doesn't matter that he spent so much money. Or the opposite case also. But here's where the special case is. What if he spent money to upkeep the field, but he didn't use any of the money that the field had developed? Yishava kama hotzi v'yitol. He has to swear to based on how much he spent, and then he's going to take money for what he spent. Now the Gemara is going to clarify what this means. The kama kima. So how much is a little? Rav Asi. I'll wait for you. Okay, so the Gemara says v'kama kima. So it says if he ate a little bit, since he spent money, but since he benefited by using some of what the field developed, he doesn't get anything back for what he spent to improve the property. So the Gemara says, how much is even a little? Amaravasi afilu grogros achas, even one dried out little fig. So basically, one thing. But that he ate it in a respectable manner. So he ate it in his house like a mensch, but not like eating it on the run. Like he took it from the field and ate it along the way. That's not derech kava. Amar Rabbi Abba, as we turn to Peyamid Aleph. Amri Bei Rav. Rav Abba said that they said in the yeshiva of Rav, Afilu Shigra de Tamri. Even a little, Rashi has two opinions here. The first thing in Rashi is that you had dates that were like chopped up and made together into like a pressed date cake. And he doesn't like this opinion. So Rashi's other opinion is it means a cluster. Seems that he ate a cluster. So, and a cluster is more respectable than a pressed date cake. But that's are the two opinions of what Rashi says, Shigra de Tamri. By Rabbi said, Chutzva de Tamri Mai. So Rashi says that this is a case where, because they used to make beer out of dates. So I don't know, Mike, if you've ever had beer out of dates, but in Bavel, where the Gemara was from in Babylonia, a date beer was a big thing. So after they made beer from the dates, there was dates at the bottom of the vat or whatever, and they were pretty low quality and didn't probably taste like much because a lot of their taste went out in the beer making process. So what if you used, if the field produced dates. Now I don't know who made the beer, because if the husband made the beer, he's benefiting from the beer, but somehow he didn't, and he didn't sell it. I don't know the exact details. And if he ate those dregs of the dates from the bottom of the beer where it was brewed, whatever, is that considered that he had a benefit from it or not? Teku. So the Gemara does not know the answer to that. Then the Gemara continues, Lo achla derech kavod mai. So what if he ate it, but he didn't eat it in a respectable manner? So what does it mean that he so Amar Ula pligi batrei Amarai b'Marava. Two Amoraim argued about it in Eretz Yisrael. Chad Amar b'ke'isr. One says he has to eat an amount of an isr, but Chad Amar b'dinar, and one is the amount worth of a dinar. So I think an isr is a lot more than a dinar. No, a dinar is worth a lot more than an isr. So a dinar isn't so much, but if he has to eat an isr, excuse me, if it's an isr, it's not so much. If it's a dinar, it's a pretty large quantity of dates. But even though he didn't eat it respectably, sit down enjoying himself, but if he ate a dinar's worth, then it's considered that he benefited from her field. Amri dined into Pumbedisa. The judges of Pumbedisa said, but Rav Yehuda uvda b'chaviles ma'oros. Rav Yehuda paskin in a case where there were chaviles ma'oros are basically the grapevines. I guess it's kind of like the cluster, or maybe even if it's wood from the grapevines that have no grapes on them. The point is, all this is firewood. So there was a husband who made improvements, and he didn't use any of like the fruit that the field used, but he used like dried out twigs and stuff as firewood. And Rabbi Yehuda paskin that was considered that he benefited from the field, from the payers of the field, and therefore, even though if he spent a lot of money to improve the field, he doesn't get any money. Now, just to clarify, what are some of the things that he would have to, that he would spend money on the field? So one thing is fertilizing it. If you don't fertilize it, it's not going to produce. So he spent money to get it fertilized. For us, we might think of a case of drainage problems. Let's say if the field was too wet, it would be swampy, you couldn't plant anything. So let's say that he improved drainage in the field. He dug trenches or whatever, or put a sewer in, so it drained and it was good. And we've read in books that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they were settling Eretz Yisrael and there were swamps there, they smuggled in, I think, eucalyptus trees, and eucalyptus trees absorbed a lot of the water. So then they were able to plant things. I don't know exactly why the eucalyptus, how it works that way, but that's what I've read.
It's known that I think the same was done in California.
Okay, so meaning there's certain cases where you can understand where a field he would put money in to improve a field. But even so, that's if the field is no good. By putting in drainage, he made it a good field. But even a regular field, if you don't fertilize it, it's not going to stay a fertile field. Rabbi Yehuda letamei. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda, who paskin that even if the husband only used some firewood from the field, or he didn't use it as firewood. He used it to feed his animal. Now Rashi says that this is Michael Lapilin. It's food for elephants, and he fed it to his animals. So I don't know that this guy actually had elephants or not, but that's what Rashi seems to say. Rashi says that it was elephant food, and he fed it to his pet, to his animal. He didn't actually say that he fed it to his elephant, but whatever. Rabbi Yehuda Tamei, and this fits in with Rabbi Yehuda said in another case, Am Rabbi Yehuda, Achla Orla Shvius V'Kalayim Harezu Chazaka. So the halacha is that, well, the question is, how do you take ownership of a field? So if you have a document that a sale was made, that shows that someone gave it to you or you paid him. That's a way to acquire a field. Or chazaka. What's chazaka? Chazaka could be improving the field. Chazaka could be putting a fence around the field. Chazaka could mean showing ownership out of the field. So how do you show ownership? If you use the stuff that the field grows. So if you ate orla, so orla is trees within the first 3 years, we're not allowed to benefit from it. Anything that grows on a tree the first 3 years you plant it has to be burned. Shvius, if you ate from it on Shemitah. We learned Shemitah a couple of years ago, Hachal Shemitah. Shemitah, you're not considered the owner of the field. Everyone's it's ownerless, so everyone's an equal owner. You could only eat it like anyone else could eat it. And kalayim is a mixture of crops. And the Midiraisa case, I believe, is wheat and grapes. And that's also, you're not allowed to have any benefit from it. So if you ate from these things, orla and kalayim are things that you're not allowed to have any benefit from at all. Shvius is stuff that's considered ownerless. But if you ate it from your field, either you ate orla all 3 years or part of the 3 years of chazaka that you were showing ownership, you ate these things that really weren't permitted to have benefit from, but you did it anyway. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's chazaka. So having a very low level or even a forbidden type of benefit from a field, Rabbi Yehuda considers it to be benefit. So therefore, feeding twigs to your animal is considered, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is a good form of ownership. But I would say that this line of the Gemara saying is that that all holds according to Rabbi Yehuda. But if we don't paskin Rabbi Yehuda, we wouldn't paskin about the case of Chaviles Moros, about the twigs. But obviously there has to be some minimum level. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's even considered minimum level. Most people probably argue on that. Rav Yaakov, Rav Chisda. Rav Yaakov's in the name of Rav Chisda. So what if his wife is a minor? So if he spent money on the property and she's only a minor, it's as if he's improving someone else's field. So this isn't the literal case of a katana, but this is a case of Rashi says, because if it's a regular case that her father married her off, she's his wife completely. But this is a case where her father died, and so the mother and the brother married her off. So Midiraisa, it's not a wedding, because Midiraisa, the only the father has the right to marry her off, not the mother and the brother. So if the mother and the brother married her off, Midiraisa doesn't work. So if by the time she comes bas mitzvah, if she says, I don't like this guy, I don't want the marriage is retroactively annulled. So what happens if he married someone and she was a katana and an orphan? and her mother and her brother married her off, and she brought in property into the wedding. What happens if the husband spends money to improve the fields? So Rav Yaakov says it's like that he found an abandoned field somewhere and improved it. Is it his field? No. So when you fix someone else's field because you don't see anyone there, you saw an abandoned field, so you fertilized it, you grew some stuff, and then a guy came back. He'd been in Australia for a few years, so it's his field, and you're not denying that it's his field, but you say, look, your field was worth $80,000 before, but because of my improvements, it's worth $100,000. So pay me $20,000 because I made your field worth more. So the halacha is that the owner of the field does have to pay him for his improvements, even though he didn't ask for it to be improved. It wouldn't help if you tell him not to when he doesn't listen, then that's a different case. So in the case where he married this orphan girl, it's as so if she says I don't want the marriage, and so the marriage becomes annulled, the estate of the father would have to pay him for the improvements because it's not worse than improving someone else's field without them asking when they're not around. That's what this Gemara is saying. My time, why is this halacha? Avdu Rabbana takanta teheche delo nifsedu. The Rabbanan made this as a benefit for her so that the husband won't run them into the ground. Because since the father's already dead, you might think that the husband's going to say, oh, what do I care? There's no because he has no father-in-law, so he's not going to have someone who's nudging him to take good care of the field. So he might drive him into the ground completely. So the Chachamim gave a benefit that they say, if you treat it well and she ends up refusing the marriage, you'll get paid back for it. So it's an incentive to him to treat the land well and maybe even improve it. Because in case that the marriage falls through, that she says no, and it gets annulled, he's not out of luck. He still gets compensated, reimbursed for the improvements that he made on the field.
So if they reject, the field belongs to the local husband? Potentially, what?
No, so this orphan girl, so the field will go back to her dead father's estate.
Help me.
But
I want this one. This one.
It is this one. It's the same one.
I want this one.
Stop touching it. So if the marriage gets annulled because the girl doesn't want it, and he improved the property, let's say by $20,000, the estate will pay him $20,000. The same halacha, like the guy said, the guy was in Australia, so someone else improved.
If they don't pay,
If he didn't improve,
the field belongs to.
no,
What happened then?
I don't know.
Well, we don't.
Based-in will tell him they have to pay. He'll be a creditor. Then the estate will owe him somehow. That's what lawyers are for, right? When people are disputing a case.
By the way, eucalypts grow naturally in Australia.
Eucalyptus? Yeah, I know.
You just mentioned that.
Yeah, that's true. But I meant Australia because the guy's nowhere around here to see what's going on with his field. But yeah, I know that. So there was a certain woman, Denafula Arba Meazuzi Chozai. She inherited 400 zuz worth in Bar Chozai. So Bar Chozai is a place that was far away. It seems that this was a field worth 400 zuz in Bar Chozai. Azal Gavra Apik Shismea Aiti Arba Mea. So, or no, it wasn't a field. I think maybe it was cash. She inherited money, but it cost him $600 to travel over there to get the $400. So was it a smart investment? Not really. He spent $600 to get $400, so he's out $200. So what's halacha? Bahadidika asi, when he was coming home, itzrach lechad zuzah. He was short on money, so he borrowed $1, from this. V'shalkaminahu, and he took it from the inheritance. Also kamed Rabbi Ami, and then he came back to Rabbi Ami and asked for the shaila. He said, I spent $600. I deserve the $600 because that's the amount I spent to get my wife's money. Amar le masho tiotu masho achalacha. So Rabbi Ami Paskin, because you used one zuz, you benefited from the estate. So our Mishnah says, even if you spent a lot of money and you benefited only a little bit, you don't get reimbursed. So then the Gemara says that's not simile. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about, because Amrle Rabbanu Rabbi Ami, Rabbanu said to Rabbi Ami, Hanimili Hechada Achal Peira. The Mishnah is true is when you ate from the what the Art Scroll translated as usufruct, but you benefited from what the inheritance earned. But here, here he didn't use any of the payros, he used part of the actual principle. And the halacha was only said if the husband, because the husband doesn't get any of the principal, but in this case he was out of money and he was traveling, so he had no other choice. Either he could take a loan from someone in the middle of nowhere that no one would have lent him money because they didn't know him, or he borrowed $1 from this inheritance. So that $1 is from the principal. So because he didn't use the Karen, the payros, the fruit that the interest or the benefits that principal is gaining, that's not similar to a case where a Mishnah of Hotzahi, and this was this zuz that he borrowed was not benefiting from it. It was part of his travel expenses to get the money. So imkain, so if that's true, havale hotzi v'lo. So this is a case where he spent and he didn't use anything that her property developed. Yishava kamahoti v'yito. So according to the Mishnah, he has to make an oath and based on how much he spent, and he gets to take the amount that he spent. So now we're gonna explain this line in the Mishnah, because what's clear from the Mishnah, the Gemara is gonna say it's not so clear. Yishava kamahoti v'yito. He swears how much he spent, and he gets to take reimbursement from it. Ravasi says that's as long as the improvement is at least as much as what he spent. So in regard to which halacha is Rav Yossi saying? The first case or the second case? Rabbi in the Mishnah. Because in the Mishnah there were two cases. The first case was is that a case of if he spent a lot and ate a little bit, or is it about the case of if he spent and he didn't eat? So is this a case where he has to make a shvua, or that he doesn't have to make a shvua? So Amar Abaye says she'im haisa shevach yasser al that if the improvement was more than what he spent, no telas hahotza below shvua, he can take the amount that he spent without even taking a vow. Amalei Rabba said in Cain asilis rume, then people are going to cheat out the estates. They're going to claim that they spent a certain amount of money and the improvements were even more, and they're going to even be able to take the money without a vow. So Elama Rava, so therefore Rava says she'im haisa, that Rava Asi meant she'im haisa hotza yisera la shevach. If the expenses were more than what the improvements, ein lo el hotza shir shevach. He only gets the amount of the improvement of the field uvishvua, and he has to take a shvua. So what does this mean? This means that let's say he spent $20,000. There was a drainage problem in the field. So we're at Rava at the very bottom of the first paragraph of 80A3. So Rava explains that let's say there was a drainage problem. The husband spent $20,000 to fix the drainage problem. But let's say that the field only went up by $15,000. So everyone admits that despite him trying to make the field worth better, it didn't work. I mean, he spent the money and improved it, but he spent more than what he improved. So Rava says he'll only get the $15,000 and he has to take a shvur to get that money. He has to make an oath to the Beis Din that he spent that money on the field. So therefore, he's not going to be able to run a scam. And also, we're not denying that he made improvements, but he can't get more money than what the improvements actually improve the value of the field. So like we said, does it make sense to spend 20,000 to get 15,000? No, you're out 5,000. But maybe he made the improvements hoping it would go up more, and it didn't. So he's not completely out of luck, but he's not going to get paid back all of his investment. What if a husband, instead of actually getting the benefiting from the fruit itself, what if he hired sharecroppers? So the sharecroppers are the ones who are harvesting the fruit and benefiting from the fruit, but they have to give him a commission or a percentage. Is that considered that the husband is benefiting from the payros or not? Mahu, what's the halacha? So if these sharecroppers made an improvement, is that considered that the husband made the improvement, or is it not considered that the husband made the improvement? Yeah.
He got this field.
Yeah.
He didn't improve anything, but sold it.
He doesn't have the right to sell it. These fields, he has no right to sell. It's not his. If he tried to sell, it's like me selling your house. Has no legal effect. That's what we're saying. She owns it. He only has the benefit of the stuff that it produces.
So the only thing he can do is just doing nothing or make some improvement.
Right. If he doesn't fertilize it, so let's say it makes $50 a year and it's growing oranges, and he makes 50, but if he doesn't fertilize it, it's going to stop growing the oranges. He's going to get zero. And if he uses a better fertilizer, it might improve to $60. But it depends. How much does he have to spend on the fertilizer? If he has to spend $100 on fertilizer to get an extra $10 of oranges, it doesn't make sense.
So he's eligible only for, let's say, interest for fruit.
Correct. He gains the interest on it, but sometimes, because she's not considered to have her own money, because anything she acquired is by him, other than this type of property. So she can't do any improvements to the property. So he has to upkeep the property. That's the situation. So adaita de bal nachis, if the sharecroppers improve the land, they fertilized it, they put a new fence around it to protect it. Is that considered that they were acting on behalf of him, and therefore he made improvements to the field, and potentially he can make that money back if it improved the value of the field? And just like if the husband made improvements, he doesn't get any money, because if he's benefiting from it, it's the quid pro quo, even if it's not equal. Odilma adaita de aranachas, or do we say that the sharecroppers are working for the field itself, and the land is ready for sharecropping? So meaning, is it considered that are they considered the husband making improvements, or are they considered a third party? Like we said, when someone's in Australia and you fixed up a guy's field, you get benefit. So would these sharecroppers that the husband hired and they made improvements to the field, would the wife's money, however she would have money or whatever, if he would die first, and so then she gets her field back and she gets money, does she have to pay them for the improvements? So that's the question. Rav Baruch Hanan asked against the question. Why is it any different than someone who goes to someone else's field and improved it, but not to shlobershrus, planted trees without permission? Shaman lo, the halacha is we evaluate how much he benefited the field, v'yedo al tachtona, and he gets paid, but on the lower, if there's some type of issue, he gets paid the lower end, not the higher end. So why wouldn't these sharecroppers get money for their improvement? So the Gemara says, because there was no one else to work in the field. Here, the husband has the right to do. There, the guy was in Australia, so no one else was going to do the fields. If they planted trees, and so now the field is producing something that's good. Here, the husband is around. He could have chosen to work in it. So my havala. So what's the question? The answer to our question. Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua Chazinan Ibal Arasu. If the husband himself is like a sharecropper and he could work it himself, he's therefore, so basically, if their capabilities and the husband capabilities are similar, so if they make an improvement, it's as if the husband made the improvement. Ibal Lav Arasu, but if the husband is not a sharecropper, Ara Rise Kaima. So then we say that the land is there for sharecropping, they made an improvement. It's like you improve someone else's field and you have to reimburse them for it.